Welcome everyone. I'll try and be really brief. I'm Mallejacq, Secretary General of PIARC, the World Road Association. It's really my pleasure to be here with you today, especially since the tunnels activities in PIARC are really very dynamic. Diapositive suivante, Robin, si tu veux bien. So PIARC, for those of you who don't really know us, it's the new name of the World Road Association. We were founded more than 110 years ago as a non-profit and non-political association. And our objective really is to organize the exchange of knowledge, policy and practice on all matters that are related to roads and road transport. So lots of topics really. Our main members are member governments from France, from Italy, Germany, Sweden, everywhere. 125 member governments, Latin America, South America, North America, Africa, Asia, as well as regions, companies, universities, individuals. The way we work is to mobilize the experience and knowledge of experts, not from the team itself. We have a very small team based in Paris, but from experts who are mobilized from their countries and who volunteer their time to work in some of our technical committees and task forces. And we are incredibly thankful to these colleagues from CETU in France and from all over the place, who really are willing to exchange ideas and best practice with their colleagues. Diapositive suivante, Robin, si tu veux bien. Ah oui, diapositive suivante. So what we do is to facilitate the exchange of knowledge on everything that's related to roads. So we create committees and task forces. They enable dialogue between peers. They also enable you, if you're a member of one of those committees, to build a network, worldwide network. And what they do in those committees is to exchange ideas and to work towards reports or other types of deliverables. So that's a great guiding principle, exchanging ideas freely, but at the end of the process, there is a report. Those deliverables are really widely accessible. They can be reports, case studies, literature reviews, etc. Seminars and workshops. Like today, it's a webinar, and you didn't have to register. It's open to all. Online manuals, such as there's one on tunnels, for example. Software and tools, HTM4 or DG-QRAM, which is going to be discussed in depth today. Our quarterly magazine, Route Roads, and all of that is usually available in English, French, and Spanish, and usually free of charge. Not always, but usually. As well as the congresses that we are renowned for. The next one will take place in 2022 in Calgary, virtually, and then 2023, Prague. Diapositive suivante, si tu veux bien.
Ah.
Non.
Say no?
No. So, in addition to the seminars and congresses, we've organized numerous online events. I will not bore you with the details. Just note that about a month ago, we organized a very interesting webinar with India, our colleagues in India of the Indian Road Congress on road tunnels, construction and operations. And we have this webinar today. So if you want to be up to date with all of these events, you can check our calendar on the website. And there will be many more. Diapositive suivante, si tu veux bien. The way we work is through committees. This is a table that presents all of them. The Tunnels Committee is there. It's part of something we call Resilient Infrastructure theme, which gives a flavor of what we are working on during this 4-year work cycle. Lots of topics. They will be presented more in depth, I'm sure. And let me just reiterate here that this is one of our most dynamic committee. Next slide, please, Robin. Recent publications include one on tunnels, which is called Improving Road Tunnels Resilience, which was published a few months ago, and others, of course. There will be many more coming in the next months, and I invite all of you to, if you're interested, to check them on our website and download them. They are free. Next slide is going to be my last slide. This is a very interesting webinar today. I think we haven't talked about DG-QRAM in a long time. If you want to know more about what we do and join us for future events, please note the World Winter Service and Road Resilience Congress, which will take place virtually in February next year. the SURF conference in September, and in October 2022, together with our colleagues from Spain, we organize the...
Sorry, there are people who have not switched off their microphones. Please.
Yeah, and then in October in Spain, together with our colleagues from Ministry in Spain and all the excellent partners we have in that country, and internationally, the second international conference on road tunnel operations and safety. The first one took place in Lyon in France in 2018, and the second one is going to be really just as great. And well, this is all I wanted to say. I've been too long, I'm afraid. Let me wish you an excellent webinar, and thank you to all who have organized it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Patrick. Just before I give the floor to Christophe from the French Center of Tunnels, I please remind all participants who have not done it yet to switch off their microphone so that we do not have any noise behind the speaker. Thank you very much. So Christophe, you have the floor, and normally you are able to share your screen right now. Ah, Christophe?
Et couper son micro. Ton micro.
Okay. Christophe, we don't hear you.
Okay, sorry. Okay. A little trouble because I have multiple screens, but it works now. Thank you very much, Robin. And I'm very happy to talk about DG-QRAM today in front of such an audience, even if it is in the virtual world. And the goal of my presentation is to give you an overview of DG-QRAM, the tool, and also of the ongoing project to upgrade it and improve it. So let's begin with some background. Oops, sorry. So DG-QRAM was funded by OECD and European Union. The versions until 3.61 were developed under the aegis of OECD and PIARC by Ineris, Atkins, and Waterloo University. And the goal of this tool is to evaluate risks of dangerous goods transport through road tunnels in order to aid the decision-making process. By the way, it could also evaluate risk on routes without tunnels. This tool is currently used in 26 countries, mostly in Europe. So you can use DG-QRAM.
Christophe, sorry to interrupt you. We don't see the next slides, so change the presentation mode.
Okay. Is it okay now or not?
No, it doesn't work.
Doesn't work? Oh, okay, it's a pity. Okay. Is it okay now?
No.
Sauf tu pourrais passer soit en mode diapositive une par une, soit arrêter de partager, recommencer à partager et là choisir l'option en haut à gauche qui est de partager l'écran complet. C'est un peu brutal, mais ça marche très bien.
C'est ce que j'ai fait, j'ai partagé l'écran complet en fait. Mais je pense que le problème, je crois savoir d'où vient le problème. Attends, je vais essayer de... sorry for this little, we have made some tests, but as always, even when there is tests, it doesn't always work. So how is it now?
No.
Okay, let's try again. Sorry for that. It should work. I will try another thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it okay now?
Go back to the previous one.
Okay.
Yes, I will try.
Okay.
Okay, it works. So
Yes.
sorry, we have made tests twice, but as always, you know, this is always the D-days that it doesn't work properly. Let's go to the use of DG-QRAM. So you can use this to assess the societal risk of transporting dangerous goods through a tunnel or along a route. And then you can compare the societal risks with reference criteria or between routes. And you could also assess the societal risk for each ADR category in order to determine which category minimizes the risk, which one minimizes the risk. But with the current version 4.04, it requires some expertise to do so. We will easiest this with a new version, new improvement version, and Nikos will tell you more about this. So let's have some words about tunnel categories from A to E. Each category corresponds to a certain risk level acceptance in the tunnel. That means for category A, all dangerous good transports are allowed in the tunnel. With category B, the dangerous goods transport with risk of a very large explosion are forbidden in the tunnel and must circulate in alternative routes. And then through to category E, in which nearly all dangerous goods transport are forbidden in the tunnel. And therefore, the risk of a given category is the sum of the risk on the tunnel routes and of the risk of alternative routes. That means the risk of dangerous good transport that are allowed to travel in the tunnel and the alternative route risk is the risk of dangerous good transport that are forbidden in the tunnels and that must circulate in these alternative routes. So DG-QRAM can provide you indicators and figures as a measurement of the societal risk, especially FN curves, in which F is the frequency to have N or more fatalities or casualties. And the second result type, it's expected values of fatalities or casualties. If we look at a given curve, two curves actually, given the principle that F is the frequency of N or more curves, you always have downward curves. And they are represented in abscissa logarithmic type. And if you look at this point, this red point, it represents the number, the frequency to have 10 or more fatalities. Okay, so F10 is the frequency to have 10 or more fatalities. Then let's talk a bit about how DG-QRAM works. I won't say so much here because Raphaël will tell you more throughout an example. So mainly the DG-QRAM tool is based on 13 scenarios. 11 of them are linked to specific dangerous good phenomena. And there is 2 fire scenarios for certain dangerous goods. Of course, these 13 scenarios are not exhaustive, but they are representative of all the dangerous goods you could have en route, and sometimes for certain of them in a conservative way. So these scenarios are modeled by the tool based on input data you fed them with, like characteristics of routes, traffic, including the time period, etc. And after some calculation, it will give you outputs FN curves or expected value. So DG-QRAM is not the best software or tool to do certain things, especially it's not the most appropriate software to assess risk of heavy goods vehicles without dangerous goods, or to assess smoke propagation, ventilation, evacuation, etc. Because its focus is not the fire itself, but the dangerous good phenomena. So there are more appropriate softwares or tools that will give you this kind of assessment, like FDS, for example, and of course, others. To properly use DG-QRAM and somehow enjoy it, you need some general competencies. First, in tunnel safety and equipment, for instance, ventilation, but also in the field of safety and risk assessment of dangerous good transportation. And it's necessary to have a good knowledge of the DG-QRAM user's guides before trying it. It may be a bit frustrating, I know, but it's far more better to first read the DG-QRAM user's guide and then to afterward use the tool. Then you should also be aware of the software limitations and understand it in order to properly interpret the results, because as all tools, it has its limitations. And at the best, you need training, a specific training to use DG-QRAM. So the next sessions are likely to be organized in 2022. So I invite you to check regularly the PIARC websites, and you have a link below with information to find the information regarding this training session. So as I said, the next sessions are likely to be organized in 2022 after the end of the project. And this project, the upgrading project, was set up under the aegis of PIARC General Secretary and Committee C44.
De la IPCR et par son comité 4.4. Il est géré et coordonné par le CETU et il a été financé par 8 pays et il
expertos del sector privado, además y del sector público. Y por supuesto, nuevos patrocinadores, países patronizadores están bienvenidos. Es un proyecto
the tool in order to make it compatible with existing software or environments. And the second goal was to correct some bugs. So this phase is now achieved. And the DG-QRAM version 4.04 is compatible with MS Windows up to 10 and at least Excel up to 2016. Both 32 and 64 bytes. The phase 2 aims to improve the tool, for example, by adding some new functionalities. It will last until 2022 or later if we get additional budgets to do more improvements. So this second phase is, of course, the most challenging one because we will modify the way the software is functioning. So we must be very careful to not introduce bugs or malfunctioning, some little malfunctioning. The improvement requirements were defined and ranked by funding countries' representative with the help of experts. And to ensure reliability and flexibility, a consultant and a contractor were involved. The consultant is Enalos from Greece, today represented by Nikos Vagiokas. And it will provide assistance services like testing the software with new improvement and validate this improvement. The contractor is BG, with as subcontractor ILF. BG is today represented by Raphaël Defert. And of course, the contractor will take care of the improvement itself and implement it in the software. Last but not the least, every improvement are implemented separately on a step-by-step basis so that we test each version with the new improvement before going to the second one. So just a glimpse of on the table we used to rank the improvement tasks. You see that it was we have done this with a multi-criteria approach with the expert user and also the funding countries representatives. I won't tell too much because Nikos will detail this in his presentation. So to conclude, you can get DG-QRAM again by using these links. So you will have, of course, all the presentations after this webinar, and by choosing order form. And definitively, you haven't to wait to buy the software because if you buy the current version 4.04, and if you update it later by paying some euros, it will cost you the same as if you buy the new updated version after the end of the project. So this is the end of my presentation. I thank you for your attention. And sorry for the little technical difficulties. And if you have any question, I will be pleased to answer them. You could use, as Robin told you, the chat to do so.
So thank you, Christophe. Yes, indeed, you may ask questions in the chat, and when the webinar is over, we will group all these questions and make a feedback to everyone. So don't hesitate to raise any question that you feel useful. Just as I told earlier, for those who were not there at the very beginning of the meeting, please do it in English. And for those who have, the many people who have connected in between, we are now more than 200 people online. I remind you that somewhere at the bottom of the Zoom screen, you have a button to allow to have interpretation into French and Spanish if you wish. There is a small word map with the word interpretation, so do not hesitate to click on it. And we have 4 very experienced interpreters who are working hard to provide you with a good French or Spanish interpretation. So again, thank you, Christophe. I now give the floor to Raphaël Defert from BG Consulting Company, and he will introduce himself. Raphaël, you have the floor and you can display your presentation.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try to is it okay for everyone?
I saw, excuse me, Raphael, we have some time, Robin, for questions to answer the question directly. We have 15 minutes or 10 minutes, maybe, according to the agenda. So I saw some question in the. Okay,
so sorry. Okay, in that case, excuse me, Christophe said.
No problem.
You can answer the first question.
Okay. No, okay. Just the first question is about the price of the software. If you currently have the version 4.04, we haven't decided yet of the cost of the upgrades to move to the next version that will be available after the end of the project. This is something we will discuss with PIARC General Secretary and C44. And of course, funding country representative, and that will depend of the improvements we would have been able to implement in the software. So definitively, it will not cost you 15,000 euros. The principle is that the version 4.04 is currently 1,500 euros.
Let me add something. If some of you are the owners of the old 3.61 version, because there still might be some of you who have not moved to the new 4.04, you can buy the current version for 1,000 euros. We have the list of all owners of a former version, so you can right now buy the 404 for 1,000 euros. If you don't own any, if you don't have any version, it's 1,500. And as Christophe just explained, when the new one is released next year, you will only be requested to pay the difference if you want the upgrade. I will share with you at the end of the webinar some elements on where to find the order form on the website. And I can already tell you that by next week, it's not ready today, but by next week, next Thursday, probably, it will also be possible to pay it directly online. So you can wait a week and then you will be able to pay by credit card directly from our website. Okay, so next question maybe?
Yes, actually, maybe Robin, the 3.61 is a very good example. The 3.61 was about 1,000 euros, and the version 4.04 was 1,500 euros. And those who had already the version 3.61 only had to pay 50 euros to get the version 4.04. So at the end, it costs to the previous owner of version 3.61 and the new buyers of the version 4.04 the same cost. It was the same amount of money, and it will be the same for this version. So the next question is: is this software available in Australia? Yes, of course, it is in English, but you can buy it on PIARC website without any difficulties.
Some Australian people already bought it, so it's doable.
Yes, and next question, and I see that there is quite a lot of question, but we have some time for question until 13, and for what I remember, it's just last. Okay, we have 6 minutes left, so it's okay. So it's a very good. Yes, okay. The question is the software used during the conception phase of the tunnel or during normal operation? I would say that it could be useful in both cases. It's very useful when you have a tunnel to construct or to refurbish, to do it, because the decisions of allowing or not the dangerous good transport in the tunnel will have consequences on the way you should equip your tunnel. For example, if you, in France at least, if you allowed tunnels in, if you allow dangerous good transport in tunnels, your ventilation system should be stronger, and you should also have some specific equipments. Yes, it's useful for construction or refurbishment of tunnels. But it could be we also have used it when the question during normal operation, during let's say during the life of the tunnel, there is specific question regarding dangerous goods that arise, and so you could use also. That means that you may have after the construction not so much dangerous good, and suddenly you have a company that's try the vicinity of the tunnel to install a plant or something like that, and this creates a circulation of dangerous goods more important than previously. So you could use the software to assess the new risk. The next question is, will be the recording available to us at the end of the seminar? I let you the floor, Robin.
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Which platform are supported by the software? It is supported by Windows until up to 10. And as the tool used Excel, it's also it can be used with Excel. It was in one of my slides up to 16, I think, by arts.
Christophe, and this will be the last question. You skipped a question in French asking whether the software is mostly used for the design of a tunnel or whether it's used in the framework of routine operation.
Yes, I have answered to this question, Robin, I think.
Okay,
I hope correctly. So, okay, so it's 2016, yes, was the, sorry, I made a little mixed take. Okay, the next question is, okay, recording. DG-QRAM work with the latest Windows, it does not run on macOS. Yes, okay.
So now I think we can give the floor to Raphaël. Sorry for that.
Okay, I just test if the presentation is okay for everyone.
It seems to be.
Is it in full screen for everyone?
Yes, we have the notes on the right hand side.
Ah, okay. So.
Raphaël, c'est l'écran peut-être. Si tu
yeah.
l'écran.
And now, is it okay?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So good afternoon. My name is Raphaël Defert. I am an expert in tunnel safety and industrial risk. I'm very pleased to speak of this software, which is a part of my life, at least my professional life. 20 years ago and 10 years ago, I have participated to the development of this model for PIARC and after for Swiss administration. And now I am the project manager for the new developments of the model. I provide also some training course for new users or experienced users. And from time to time, I have the chance to use this software for case studies, such as Driscoll's tunnel that I'm going to present you. And Driscoll's tunnel, for my part, it's a good example of international case study because it's a Greek tunnel, and we have applied on this tunnel the French methodology concerning transport of dangerous goods assessment. A short presentation of the tunnel, if you can see my screen, if it's okay. So we are in the north of Greece. We have a long motorway in the north of Greece operated by Enalos. I just show, yeah, this motorway in the north of Greece. And in the west part of this motorway, there is the city and the lake of Ioannina. And of course, there is a tunnel in this area with a new motorway, and it is the longest tunnel of the Enalos network. The presentation of the tunnel, it is a twin bores tunnel of 4.5 kilometers with cross passages every 400 meters. There is longitudinal ventilation and also a shaft in each bore, and it is a tunnel that is monitored 24 hours a day. Some words about the French methodology we have applied. In France, there is a first step which consists in calculating the risk of the tunnel itself, the absolute value of the risk for the tunnel. This is what we call intrinsic risk or expected value. And it's not very funny, but it corresponds to the average number of fatalities per year linked with the transport of dangerous goods. If the risk is higher than the threshold, that is 10 to the minus 3, you have to carry out a comparative risk analysis. If the risk is lower than this threshold, you have the possibility to allow dangerous goods in your tunnel. Then in the second step, you have to compare the risk according to the different ADR regulations for the tunnel, A to E, and you have to consider the whole risk of the tunnel route plus alternative route. And I'm going to explain in a short example, it will be easier for you to understand. Imagine you have a transit of dangerous goods between A and B, and you have a tunnel route, and you have an alternative route through a city, for example. And imagine your tunnel is in category C, for example. That means that you have to assess the risk of the dangerous goods that will pass through the tunnel. That means all the dangerous goods except LPG and toxics that are forbidden for class C. And you have also to calculate the risk for these dangerous goods on the alternative routes because they are forbidden in the tunnel, but they are going to pass through another route. And there are also risks outside the tunnel in the city, for example. And the purpose of a comparative risk analysis is to calculate the whole risk and to find the category that will optimize the level of risk for both routes. Here you have the list of the scenarios in the QRA and the corresponding with the ADR category. We have the QRA was developed before the definition of the ADR category, but by chance, there is a perfect adequation between scenarios and restriction codes. So if you have a tunnel of category A, that means that all dangerous goods are allowed, and all the scenarios you see here are possible in your tunnel. If you are in a category B, for example, you see here restriction code B for these 3 scenarios corresponding to LPG. It is 3 phenomena linked with LPG. That means that if you have a category B, you could have all the scenario except these 3 ones that are linked with LPG, which is forbidden in a tunnel of category B. Then for Driscoll's tunnel, as I said, we have carried out the first step for the tunnel. That means calculate the risk only for the Driscoll's tunnel. And you have an overview of the input data that are required for that. First of all, the traffic data that were given by the operator, Ignacio Odos, in 2008. And these data were extrapolated to 2020. Same thing for DG traffic. We have made some countings that we have extrapolated to 2020 also. For the tunnel itself and its operation, we have considered the current situation when we have done the study. For ventilation, we have made some calculations in order to know what will be the air velocity in the tunnel in case of a DG event, taking into account the capacity of the mechanical ventilation in this tunnel. And for accident rates, as it was a new motorway, of course, we hadn't some statistic about this road. Then we have taken into account some default values, and we have made some sensitivity analysis on these default values. The calculations, we have the results were around the threshold of 10 to the minus 3, but we have seen that for some sensitivity cases, the value of the risk was higher than this value. That's the reason why we have performed a complete comparative risk analysis. This is the second step. Then you can see on the map the possible routes for DG traffic. In white, you have the route, the motorway with the Driscoll's tunnel here. And you have the alternative route in black, which is the historic route for DG traffic before the motorway was built. And what is important to understand is what is interesting for us is only the transit between A and B. Because imagine you have a truck that comes at point A and goes on this route to supply a gas station in Ioannina. In any case, this truck will pass through the tunnel because it goes to Ioannina. For us, there is no use to take into account this truck, we only consider the transit between A and B. The first step when you perform a comparative risk analysis is to split your routes into homogeneous segments. We speak about homogeneous when we have the same infrastructures, for example, tunnel or open road. If we have the same number of lanes, the same speed limit, the same traffic, so on and so forth, because the QRAM model calculates risk when these parameters are fixed. Then on the alternative routes, we had 86 homogeneous segments. And as you can see, there were specific segments, which was a cut and cover on the alternative routes near the airport of Ioannina. On the motorway, there were only 27 segments with 3 specific segments, which is, of course, one for the tunnel, Driscoll's tunnel, but also 2 cut and covers in north and south of the tunnel. An important point concerning the entrance data for the model are traffic data. Why? Because if you have an accident, a DG accident, DG event, the first population that will be possibly impacted, implied by an event will be the people, the road users on the infrastructures. So it's very important to know the level of traffic during different periods of time. Indeed, we have to define a maximum of 3 periods of time. Generally, we have a peak period during the day, in the morning and the end of afternoon. We have a normal period during the day, the day accepted peak period, and we have a quiet period during the night. And for each period, each segment, and each direction, if the traffic is not symmetric, you have to know the hourly traffics, the percentage of AGV, and the percentage of bus. And for that, we have organized some countings with the 2 operators, that means for each route, to have this information for each segment of the route. Same thing for DG traffic data, of course, which is a very important data we need when you perform a comparative risk analysis. As I said before, we have to know the transit between A and B. And then for each period of time and each direction, we need the hourly traffics, but also we need the composition of the traffic. That means the percentage of each DG class. Because of course, according to the nature of the DG, the effects and the consequences on local population and on road users won't be the same at all, because flammable liquid or gas, toxic gas or flammable gas, the distance of effect are not at all the same. So the composition is also very important, and the volume of dangerous goods also. And for that, we have also organized some specific countings during 2 weeks to count all the dangerous goods traffic on the historic road. Just an overview of the results of the countings. So as you can see, the first 2 bullet points concern danger code 13 and 33. And as you can see, it is something like 70% of the traffic. It is linked with flammable liquids. And most of the time, this category is the highest part of the traffic. Very specific point concerning the counting for Driscoll's, it is the importance of class 1 explosive. Generally, this class is lower than 1% of the traffic. Very few dangerous goods like that. But in this case, there were 10% of the traffic for class 1. It is normally linked with the fact that the motorway was under construction, and the works required the transport of class 1 for these works. And in this case, the best way is to associate these dangerous goods to the scenarios 7, 8, and 9, which correspond to LPG. As you can see, there were also a small proportion for other flammables that we have associated with pool fire. Some infectious matters that were not affected to scenarios of the QRA, and 23 corresponds to flammable gas, and of course it was LPG and associated to these scenarios 7, 8, and 9. And there were other dangerous goods but were not associated to QRA scenarios. Concerning accident rates, unfortunately, we hadn't some data about accidents on the roads at this time. What we have done is we have some accident rates for France according to the fact that we are in open air or we are in tunnel. We have 2 lanes or 1 lane. We are in a rural route or urban route. So we have a lot of accident rates. And what we have done, we have considered these accident rates and we have corrected them by a correcting factor between Greece and France according to EU statistics. And it gives us the accident rates for every segment, for each segment in Greece. Of course, we have made some sensitivity analysis around these values to be sure of the results. Another point, I spoke about the traffic, but also the population is very important because in case of event, the population could be impacted also. So the first point is to define a grid around the itineraries to be sure that in case of event, all the effects will be inside this grid. So don't be afraid, in the user guide, there are a lot of tricks to explain you how to fix, how to define your grid around your itineraries. And the first step was very simple, just to locate, to spot the populated area inside this grid of population. After that, it is the most important work, even of the QRAM model. You have to define some squares of population, something like 200 meters on 200 meters. And in each of these squares, you have to calculate for each period of time, for night, for example, for day. You have to calculate the number of people according to housings, offices, schools, hospitals, stores, and so on. So of course, it's a huge job, but it is a very important job. And now perhaps we have some tools, new tools. If you use GIS, for example, you have a lot of information about population that you can use and calculate the number of people in each square. So at the end of the procedures, the holy grail of the QRAM model is a grid like that. Each case corresponds to a cell, a square we have seen just before. And for each period, you have to fill the number of people, which is the sum of all the contribution we have seen, housings, offices, and so on. Another point, it is methodological data because we have some scenarios in the QRAM model that are influenced by methodological data. That means the direction of the wind and also the speed of the wind. The direction is very simple. If the direction of the wind is in a direction or in another one, there won't be the same populated area in the direction of the wind. So it is necessary to know the wind rows. And for DRISCOS, we have the chance to have 2 years of data that made it possible to create this wind rows, which is an entrance parameter for the model. And last point concerning entrance data, of course, the tunnels, because tunnels are very specific segments for which we need some specific data also. So there are some data about geometric characteristic of your tunnel. There are also characteristics about the drainage system because it has a role on the way the flammable release, the liquids will be absorbed by the system, by the drainage system. Of course, the interdistance between emergency exits, ventilation, and so on. So you have to get all this information before calculate risk. So I'm sure that now you have just an idea in mind is to know the results when we have filled all this data, just an information to fill and to get and to work on all this data. It takes something like 1 or 2 months of work. So we have seen before the way the model build some FN curves. If you see here, the curve is corresponding to the category A. That means that all dangerous goods are authorized in the DRISCOS tunnel. And this is the risk of category A. And if you pass from A to B, you are going to forbid LPG in the DRISCOS tunnel. And you see the influence on the risk level. If you forbid LPG in this tunnel, the curve will be like that. It is a blue line. And of course, the risk is lower. Why it is lower? Because if you take into consideration, for example, 100 fatalities, it means that if you are in category, the frequency of occurrence here will be much higher than the frequency of occurrence if you are in category B. That means that the risk is higher for category A than for category B. And here you have the value of expected value. That means the number of fatalities per year in average. And you can see that between A and B, there is a ratio of 5 between A and B. So of course, the higher risk is for category A in this case. I have to precise that, of course, it is not a generic conclusion about this kind of studies. It depends completely on the data you are going to fill in the model. So don't take into consideration that the route with the tunnel is always representing the higher risk. It is not at all the case for all the cases. Then for a risk ratio between categories, we have noticed that there were no sensitivity case because we have carried out a lot of sensitivity case for population, for traffic, for accident rates, and so on. But there were no sensitivity case with a ratio over 10. That means in France that we have to consider other criteria to decide what will be the best solution for the tunnel. For example, there is what we call the risk aversion. It means that if you have some events with a very low frequency, but a very important consequences, of course, it is very specific events because the mediatical or the societal or the political impact will be very specific. And then it is a way to take into consideration this societal phenomena. Also the fact that, of course, in the model, we calculate the risk linked with DG, but DG HGV are also simple HGV, and these HGV could result in accidents, road accidents, and could result also in fatalities just because of the accidents. And this criteria allows to take into consideration these specific fatalities. Also a criteria about route vulnerability in case of DG accidents from economic or environmental point of view, for example, and also economic involvements of the decision we have to take. This is my last slide. We have seen that for DG risk, the category A, the risk of category A was higher than the risk for the other category, but the ratio of risk was between 3 and 10. And then in France, we consider that the difference between these risks is not sufficiently significant. Why? Just because you have uncertainties. You have uncertainties in the model itself. You have uncertainties in the data you use. And of course, there are uncertainties with the user of the model. Then we have to consider other criteria, as we have seen. I haven't got the time to present you into detail the analysis we have done for other criteria, but the result was that category A, B, or C were the most appropriated restriction regimes according to the other criteria. Then at the end, if we take into account all fatalities, that means DG fatalities that are calculated by the model, and also fatalities that are linked with road accidents, as I speak before, the category B would minimize the global level of risk. And in this sense, we have the advice we gave was to allow all dangerous goods in the tunnel, except those that may lead to a very large explosion, which is a definition of category B. And that means that you have to forbid LPG. And what is interesting also, we have seen that LPG was a very small proportion of the traffic. That means that in terms of constraints on the traffic, it was very few trucks that were that had to pass through Ioannina instead of the motorway. So from an economic point of view and for the transporters, it was not so much a problem to forbid LPG in the tunnel. I have finished my presentation, and now if you have some question, I'm going to try to answer you.
Thank you, Raphaël. Please feel free to leave this slide while you are answering the questions so that if people want to get in touch with you afterwards, they can do it. Of course, I forgot to add that all the presentations that are being displayed today will be, of course, shared with all participants of the meeting. So you will have time to come back to them and to also note down the data of our different speakers. You have, I think, 10 or 15 minutes to answer questions, Raphaël. I think you have seen we have 4 questions in the chat, so maybe you can take them one by one and answer them. I thank Nigel Casey, who had greeted us in Irish, to have this time written in English, which will make things, of course, easier for Raphaël to answer.
Okay, so I believe that there are two questions that are connected, which is this one and this one. If you still see my screen, concerning countings, two questions about countings. So what I suggest is to organize 2 weeks of counting, because if you organize just for 1 week, you could have some differences between the 2 weeks, and especially it is useful not for flammable liquid, because you have of course a lot of flammable liquid. So if you make a counting on just 1 week, you will have a lot of that. But for more rare dangerous goods, you could have dangerous goods that pass through a week and not during the other one. So it will be a pity to don't count it. So yeah, my suggestion is to have 2 weeks of countings. And there were 2 ways to do that. Either you form people that you put in cars in the vicinity of the road, and you look at the DG trucks that pass, and you note information such as danger codes or danger numbers, and you the kind of the direction, the hour, and so on and so forth. And now there are other techniques, which is LAPI, so it means camera, that are able to detect the orange placard. But the information is more or less less rich than real human beings. I hope this is a good answer for the questions 1 and 3. Are there new hypotheses taking into account?
We have question 2 from Yasufumi Iseki, and then there are new questions that have just been asked.
I don't understand the questions. Ah, Jean-Yves, I know him. Jean-Yves, in French, perhaps. What was the question concerning ADR? Yeah.
This is related, Raphaël, to the new fascicule 4 in France, in which we have changed the methodology to take account into account specifically the ADR categories.
So yeah, the study I have presented was carried out with the last version, the old version of this fascicule. It will be changed in a few words. The other criteria we have seen will be always studied. This is the main difference between before and now. Before it was just in case of, you are not able to choose according to the risk. But in the future, you will be always forced to make the analysis on the other criteria.
Raphaël, you have 2 questions which are related to the length of tunnels. One of them is from Yasufumi Iseki. Is it allowed that DGV passes through a tunnel with more than 5 kilometer length? And there is a question in Spanish, meaning which is the length of a tunnel from which it's recommended to carry out this type of risk analysis?
There is no link between the length of the tunnel and the fact that you can assess the risk or forbid the risk or whatever. Of course, if the tunnel is longer, there is a Nikos. Is it you? No, I don't know. Of course, if your tunnel is longer, the risk will be higher. But there is no link between the length of the tunnel and the assessment of the risk.
Microphones. We hear people speaking.
Hello.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Try to continue. I try to detect the one, but it's not with 200 people.
I cut it.
Okay. I cut.
And there is an interesting question also. It is more dangerous to expose a lot of people of towns to LPG explosions than fewer users in tunnel. Just on information, the people in a road user or a local population has the same weight in the risk. We don't make any distinction between these people from a ethic point of view, if you mean. Of course, if you are in a big city, if your road is inside the city, and if your tunnel is a small tunnel with a very low traffic, of course, your risk will be higher in the city. But it's not always the case, and it depends on what I said, the distance between the road and the population, the density of population, the length of the tunnel, the traffic in your tunnel. If you have a long tunnel with an important traffic, of course, you could have a lot of people inside your tunnel in case of explosion. And of course, in this case, the risk could be higher in the tunnel instead of the city.
Okay. We have some more questions. Raphaël?
Correcting factor, perhaps?
Yes.
Oh, is the correcting factor determined to modify French? Okay. We have considered some EU statistics that are available for all the countries in Europe, and the main interest for us, it was the same way to calculate the accident risk, the accident rates, sorry, according to the different countries. So we have taken these statistics at the European level in order to determine a correcting factor between Greece and France, in order to determine what will be the accident rates in Greece, because we hadn't some specific data for Greece at this time.
Okay, thank you. And we have two recent questions. One of them is, can the effects of a water mist system be simulated?
It's a good question that we have to study in the future improvement of the model. Of course, today it is not included in the model, but there will be some way to take into account. Of course, the water mist wouldn't have an effect on all the scenarios. If you have, I don't know, a vapor cloud explosion of LPG, the fact that you use a water mist has no influence on the risk. But of course, on scenario 4, for example, the pool fire, it would have an important effect. So we could, with the model, we could play on the heat release rate of the fire in case of using water mist. But you know, you have to be expert to do that. But it is, I think, it's possible with the model today.
Okay, and there was a last question 1 minute ago. If you can see it.
Yeah, HGV fires.
Yeah.
It's a good question because there were some misunderstandings using the model between DG risk and HGV risk. Some people thought that we were calculating with the model the whole risk. That means DG risk and also HGV risk, and it's not the case. We calculate only for DG risk. So in the future version of the model, we are going to skip the possibility to take into account the HGV fires. But of course, the scenario 1 and 2 that corresponds to fires could be associated to DG transport.
Okay, thank you. I don't, yes, there is just a new question right now from Mike.
VC scenario determine what are the key DG properties we call ratio to be included. I don't understand how is the VCO scenario determined. The VCO scenario corresponds to a release of a flammable gas in the atmosphere. That means open air or in tunnel. And after that, we are going to calculate the explosion of this flammable cloud. Of course, the effect won't be the same in the open and in a tunnel, because in a tunnel, we are in a confined environment. Then the risk will be higher in the tunnel for VCE. But this is it. It is an explosion of a cloud of flammable gas.
Okay, thank you. I'm just having a look.
For the next question, it will be the next presentation of Nikos. So,
okay. So thank you to Anne-Charlotte. We didn't pay her for asking the question.
Me, I have done that. I have asked her before. No.
I think there are no more questions to Raphaël. Of course, you can still ask further questions during the next presentations. And as I told you, we will commit ourselves to answer all questions. So Nikos, you can now have the floor. And so I hope this will be at least a partial answer to what we were asked by Mrs. Coupier. And as we are slightly ahead of schedule, there will be more time for further questions.
Well, thank you, Robin. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody, also from me. My name is Nikolaos Vagiokas. I'm a risk management and tunnel safety expert, mainly a consultant in petrochemical industry and tunneling industry. I'm located in Athens in Greece, and I'm going to present the procedure that is currently under development for a DG-QRAM upgrading project. Just to mention that in order to keep up with the content of my presentation, one should at least have used in the past couple of times the DG-QRAM software. During PIARC last cycle, the expert group of the Technical Committee for Road Tunnel Operations identified, evaluated, and prioritized a number of proposals for the upgrade of DG-QRAM. A communication process was established where CETU and specifically Christophe was appointed as the project leader, while after the necessary tendering procedures, Enalos was appointed as the technical consultant, and DG, my friend Raphaël, with the support of ILF, were appointed as the development contractor. In total, 21 proposals were identified by the expert group and evaluated against 3 criteria: added value for the users, amount of work required, and stability of the final software. This criteria has also been presented before by Christophe in one of his slides. The valuation concluded in 4 priority levels. Finally, 14 proposals out of the total of, how many are they? I don't remember, 25, were selected in order to be included in the upgraded project of DG-QRAM. The first proposal for improvement of priority level 1 is to get results for each ADR category. In the current version of the software, the user can get results for each ADR category by selecting manually the relevant group of scenarios that corresponds to the specific ADR category. With the proposed improvement, which has already been completed, this is being done automatically, not only for the tunnel itself, but also cumulated for both routes if there has been a route comparison in the calculations. The second proposal involves the improvement of guideline and includes all these bullets, therefore advice for data collection, change toxicity parameters for scenarios 11 and 12. Well, I remind you that 11 corresponds to acrolein in bulk release and 12 acrolein in cylinders release. Addressing the issue of empty and non-identified dangerous good vehicles during countings. Appropriate choice of data, mainly accident rates and conditional probabilities, how to link data between heavy good vehicles and dangerous good vehicles, very careful use of default statistics. If we need to distinguish categories between D and E, according to ADR, a link of all dangerous good codes to different scenarios, and finally, how to consider the rest of the ADR classes which are not directly related to the scenarios, including the class 1 explosives, like Raphaël has mentioned before, class 4 flammable solids, also we saw that in the previous example of the Riskos tunnel, class 5.1 and 5.2, dealing with oxidizing substances and organic peroxides, class 8 corrosive substances, and class 9 with all other miscellaneous substances. The next proposal, as also has been mentioned before and was the answer of one of the questions, is the elimination of scenario 1 and 2, but only for non-dangerous good vehicles. We keep scenarios 1 and 2, 20 and 100 megawatt fires, for fires coming from only dangerous good vehicles. In the current software, the user can calculate the expected value from heavy good vehicles not carrying dangerous goods. But since the software, the DG-QRAM software, concerns only dangerous goods, it has been decided to eliminate this option. Another proposal for improvement is to replace the urban-rural selection with another more relevant parameter. The urban-rural parameter affects the conditional probability to get a final scenario once an accident has occurred. This mainly depends on the speed limit, which is enforced for the under examination route. So by implying that we have at all times a high speed limit in rural areas and a low speed limit in urban areas, we may not conclude the correct results. For example, we may have a high speed limit route with tunnels, like a ring road inside urban areas. The next improvement deals with the ventilation model of the software, and this improvement involves mainly advices in the guideline without any software modification of DG-QRAM. The advices includes a description of a basic model approach used for tunnel sections, adequacy of basic model approach compared to common ventilation systems such as natural ventilation, longitudinal ventilation, point extraction, and other systems, parameters for emergency ventilation response, dangerous goods scenarios that are affected, and a comparison with other models for fire and smoke propagation. That was the first 5 improvements for priority level 1, and the next priority level, number 2, involves 9 improvements. The first one of them has to do with data input interface and includes improvements for unchanged data for different periods and sections to be inserted only once, simplify definition of tunnel sections, and ensure completeness and consistency of data input. The next improvement has to do with scenario 2, which in the upgraded version is only applicable to dangerous goods vehicles. The specific dangerous goods to be represented by scenario 2 will be defined, along, of course, with the conditional probabilities, which are necessary for the calculations regarding scenario 2. The third improvement of priority level 2 deals with the enhancement of evacuation model, mainly based on Swiss model, and includes modification of key parameters of evacuation model, which can only be applied by the expert user interface, the choice of evacuation model to be used, so the expert user can choose between the current evacuation model of the version 404 or the new Swiss model evacuation approach. And all this will be updated in the guidelines with detailed descriptions. The next improvement has to do with the use of scenario 2 in order to distinguish ADR categories D and E, which is not possible with the current version of the software. Another issue that is dealt with during upgrading is traffic jams in unidirectional traffic and how it is taken into account by proper use of the current version of DG-QRAM. This is done by applying very low vehicle speed in one of the 3 available time periods. A technical note will be included in the guidelines describing how to do it. The next improvement includes the possibility of applying different times to different sets of scenarios for time inputs, such as tunnel closure time, evacuation starting time, and ventilation activation time. This is an important feature because different times may be applied for toxic releases compared to fire incidents regarding, for example, ventilation activation. One of the most important improvements is the assessment of tunnel mitigating measures. Mitigating measures are divided to native, which are included in the software, such as drainage system, and non-native, which can only indirectly be assessed, such as barriers every 1,000 meters, hindrance and extinguishers intervals, and other measures like the fixed firefighting system that has been discussed in the previous presentation. A qualitative description of the functionality of various measures, including their influence on probabilities and/or consequences, will be included in a special technical note in DG-QRAM guidelines. Also, available options for a quantification of specific mitigating measures with the current software version will be described in the guidelines. Finally, possible suggestions for software upgrade for the purpose of evaluation of further measures will be recorded as well. The next improvement includes the assessment of scenario representativeness of the existing DG-QRAM scenarios in terms of quantities in bulk and in cylinder compared to market conditions. The influence of typical variation in quantities of dangerous goods per vehicle in the existing software will be analyzed and presented in a technical note. And last but not least, one of the most important improvements, which directly reflects the outcome of the calculation of expected value, is the review of statistics, and mainly the accident rates. Various national incident data will be collected, where of course available, in order to update the current default values. Also, a description of the nature of statistical input data, for example, collision rates of trucks, and proper use of them in the model will be included in the guidelines, along with a description of a data collection approach for an adequate model application. In this Gantt diagram, we can see that the DG-QRAM upgrading project is scheduled to last almost 2 years, 22 months to be exact, including the guarantee period, while we are expecting to release the new upgraded version of the software at the first quarter of 2022, as also Christophe has mentioned in his presentation. And here I would like to thank you for your attention, and we are open for questions.
Thank you very much, Nikos. Thank you for this very stimulating presentation. So we don't have questions to you right now. I suppose they will come.
Maybe Robin, as we have a bit ahead of the schedule, as you perfectly said, and we have no question for the moment. I would just like to precise maybe that we have already achieved the improvement, the first improvements, which was to present results for each other category. And that we are almost finished the updating of the user guides, and we have started to work on the let's say deleting of scenario 1 and 2 for heavy good transport without dangerous goods.
Okay.
And so, our current budget with not allowed us to do more. We have remaining budget for maybe one additional improvement task. So the presentation of Nikos showed you that has shown you that there is a lot remaining to do if we get more additional budgets.
Thank you. I don't see questions coming. So, okay, Nikos, is there a point? Is there something that you want specifically to point out in your presentation?
No, I just want to support what Christophe has just mentioned, that we have identified 21 proposals, and we are dealing now with the current budget only with 14 of them. That's why I'm sharing this slide.
Okay, it's an opportunity for me to point out that, of course, if QRAM users, especially those who are already experienced in using the system, have ideas, of course, we are not committed to meet all their wishes, but any good proposal will certainly be considered by the small group working with the technical committee on tunnel on this question, and of course we will examine the possibility of developing new features if they seem sound. There is a question from Nigel, which has just appeared in the chat. So maybe Nikos, if you can have a look at it and answer it, and I hope it will be inspiring for further questions.
Excuse me, Robin, could you please?
I can read the question.
Yes.
Can you describe further the mechanisms, tools, and procedures that are used to capture incident data, and whether there is best practice in terms of collection of dangerous goods incident data, and which reduction applies as best practice? If Mr. Stylianis can switch off the mic.
Yes, Robin, I saw this question.
Thank you.
I thought that it was for Raphaël because it was just below.
Okay, no problem.
So, yes.
No, if you want, Nikos, you can answer.
Yeah. In order to gather the entire data that are needed for running DG-QRAM, as Raphaël has mentioned, we need more than a couple of months, maybe 2 or 3 months. The most important, and which is directly proportional to the output, is the incident rates. And we should be very cautious of what we are going to use. So default values are not recommended to be used for all the cases, only maybe as a benchmark. So in the new version of the software, and mainly in the guidelines, we will have detailed technical notes of how to collect properly this data and use them in the software. Regarding dangerous goods movements, and I fully agree with Raphaël that we need at least 2 weeks in a row. And we should extrapolate this 2 weeks in a year, therefore taking into account the seasonality of dangerous goods traffic for the period of the 2 weeks that are within the year.
Yeah, and considering incidents, it depends on the fact that the road is monitored or not. If it's monitored, of course, the best source of information will be the operator, because the operator has the information about the material accidents on his network. And in this case, you have to ask operator for several years the list of accidents and also the traffic that make it possible to calculate rates on the infrastructures. And if you haven't got that from the operator, you could have also from the police officer sometimes when they collect the data about accidents. But you have to be sure that not the biggest accidents are collected, but also simple material accidents are collected in the base.
Yes, and moreover, Raphaël, I may enable myself. Yes, I would like to point out that it's important to be sure that you have enough data to calculate rates. That means that the database you have is reliable, maybe not fully exhaustive, but exhaustive enough, and that you have, let's say, at least, I think, 4 years of data in order to be sure that you have something representative. I think this is important to check this out.
Thank you. Christophe, we don't hear you.
Yes, it's
finished.
I have finished. Yes.
I was wondering. Okay. So, you have thanks for the combined answer. I don't see more questions so far on the chat. So I propose to give the floor. We are slightly ahead of schedule, but I know that we have many friends from Australia who must long for their bed right now. So I propose to give the floor to the chair of the Technical Committee for Tunnels, Ingo Kaundinya from Germany, who is with us today. Thank you for being here. And he will give you some concluding words. And just after that, just before we close the meeting, I will remind you some practical things for the follow-up of this meeting. So Ingo, if you want, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for this very interesting seminar. It was for me as a non-expert in dangerous good transport software. It was very interesting to learn about it.
Sorry,
and I would like to thank especially to the organizers, so PIARC General Secretariat.
Yeah, okay, fine. I wanted you to switch on the camera. It's okay. Okay, please go on.
Yeah, could you could.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much to the organizers of this webinar, to PIARC General Secretary, and also to my colleagues from the team for the updating of this DG-QRAM software. So thank you very much for organizing this, and special thanks to the presenters today, to Christophe Willmann from CETU, Raphaël Defert, responsible for the upgrading process, and Nikolaos Vagiokas, our consultant for this project. And I would also like to thank all of you for the participation in this online event. I think it was very successful from my point of view. Very good participation, more than 200. And I hope that for everyone it was fruitful and that you were able to take away something for your daily work. Finally, I would like to remind you of some of the important general information which has been mentioned by Robin and Christophe in their. So all the slides which were shown today will be shared with you. As mentioned by Christophe and also Robin, the software tool could be bought at PIARC website. The current version, which is upgraded regarding current operating systems. So phase 1. We have training sessions which will be organized after this upgrading process has been finalized. So after the upgrade is finished in 2022, and then we will organize after this upgrading process some training sessions for the youth. And if you have more questions regarding the software, please do not hesitate to contact or me directly to ask additional questions. Before ending my brief speech, I would like to highlight some of the upcoming TC44 events this year and in the next year. So for the next year, as mentioned by Patrick Mallejacq in his introduction, we have the second International Road Tunnel Operation and Safety, which will be held in October 2020 in Granada, Spain. So you are invited to submit your abstract by July 18th. So it's still open, the call for abstracts. You could submit your abstract. Please go to the event website. The link is provided on the PIARC website, and abstracts could be submitted in English and Spanish. The second event we have planned for this year.
Ingo, sorry to interrupt. We have to switch off your camera. Yes. Excuse me, we have to switch off your camera because if not, the connection is not good enough and you are interrupted every 5 seconds. So please.
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
No problem.
Thank you.
Okay. So last event I would like to mention is our workshop we are organizing on vehicles with new propulsion technologies, the impact of these new vehicles on tunnel operation. This will be a follow-up workshop from the event we had in 2019. New event is planned for October this year. This will be an in-person event, so we try to have it face-to-face. And this will be jointly organized in cooperation between PIARC and ITA Kosovo. Actually, we are planning to hold this event in Utrecht in the Netherlands as the last workshop in 2019. This was everything I would like to share with you. And again, thanks to everyone involved today in the organization and presentations of this day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ingo. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And of course, thank you to our three speakers, Christophe, Raphaël, and Nikolaos. I see some thanking messages from different countries. Thank you to all of you. Just before closing this webinar, some statistics. We had 432 registrations. Not all of them participated, but 50%, which is quite good. And as this meeting is closing, we are almost still 200 participants. So thank you to have been with us throughout this. Please, Mr. Sharma, switch off your microphone. So thank you. I would like just to display two sorry, they are not here. Two last slides to give you some encouragements for the next steps. So as I told you, of course, you all the persons who have registered will receive a link to download the presentations and the webinar itself, where you will find again all the materials what has been displayed. I would like to encourage you, those who are not familiar with PIARC, to visit our website, piarc.org. It's very easy, and particularly if you are not a PIARC member, you can very easily, with 2 or 3 clicks, become a member, which will help you to be receive regular updates on what we are doing, where you will be able to download all our documents, which are almost all of them can be downloaded for free. And of course, if you have been interested by this presentation of QRAM, you can buy a license on the current 4.04 version for 1,000 euros for users of the previous one, and 1,500 euros for new users. So we hope to have many buyers after this webinar. And as I told you, as of next week, it will be possible for you to pay directly online with a credit card. For the time being, we will send you a payment link. And when you buy the software, you receive a Dropbox link, from which you can download everything very quickly. So normally in 24 hours, you have everything which is necessary. There is also somewhere on the website, but this will be explained in the documents I will share with you. There is an email address if you have questions for support. So our speakers, Christophe, Raphaël, and Nikos, will be glad to answer, I would say, basic and simple questions. And in the case you require specific developments that are more adapted to what you exactly need, in that case, one of them might make you a commercial proposal, because of course we can't make free developments just for a specific question. But if you have problems in installing the software or basic questions, feel free to ask, and they will be glad to answer.